What we're going to do today is just share with you the Tipton story. We're going to talk a little bit about where we came from and then where we are today, and then share some of our future. Tipton originally started in 1921 in Canadian Texas. We had the distinction of being the oldest children's home affiliated with the Churches of Christ west of the Mississippi River. And how this all started was there was a family there in the church that had 5 children, and their mother died. And the church felt like they just knew they needed to do something about all these kids. And an older couple in the church said we could take the kids in and take care of them if the church would help us, and that was agreeable. And so 4 children moved into this house. But then word got around that there's a place for kids that needs a good home, and they got up to 20 children in that house. Well, at that point, they knew they needed to do something different. And you see on the screen the building that had been a private academy. It was abandoned, owned by the city of Canadian Texas, and they agreed to let the church use this as a children's home. 18 children moved into the home, and everything looked real good, but they had a way of thinking that they didn't want to say no, the church there, to any children that needed a home. And it wasn't too long, about a year, and there were 70 children. There was plenty of room for the 70 children, but then the city said, we don't want you to use the building anymore. And that's when the home moved to Tipton, Oklahoma in 1924. I want to introduce you to Brother Saul and Maggie Tipton. You see Brother Saul's picture here. He and Maggie had a compassion for homeless children. Maggie had been raised as a orphan girl, and she had 2 siblings, and they really weren't raised by anyone. They just in the fall pick cotton and have a place to stay in different times of the year. But after she was educated, she married Brother Saul, and they had a passion to take care of homeless kids. And Brother Saul was instrumental in raising money for the home when it was at Canadian Texas. They had a real nice farm there in the Tipton Valley. And they decided that they would donate 80 acres of their farm to have a children's home constructed. And you look up at the top, you see the building that was constructed. The center part was used for offices, and the wings were used for dormitories. They had a large one wing, and all the boys was in it, and the other one, all the girls were in it. Down at the bottom, you see a picture of this same building taken about a year ago. It's still in use today. It houses our administrative offices, tutoring classes, relief house parent cottage, a recreation room, and guest rooms. And when I met with the board, they asked me to come visit with them 2 years ago about taking this responsibility. There was a couple of things they asked me to do, and one of them was to thank the people that have been supporting this work with your prayers and financial support for so many years. And so thank you for all the support that you've been given. And if they call you, you tell them, Brother Don thanked us. And the other thing they asked me to do is said, we'd really like to get to know the good folks that's been supporting us. In many cases, we get a check regularly, but you are invited to come. We have a place there for guests to spend the night. If you come on Thursday, and then that's the night we have our all-campus devotional, and you'll enjoy being with the kids. They sing by the letter principle. They just open their mouth and let her fly. So we look forward to you coming and visiting with us. Talk about our support for the home, financial support. We receive no state or federal aid. Now, we're kind of unusual in this kind of a ministry. And there's a couple of reasons why that we do that. And the first one is, wherever state money goes, state control goes. And our vision is to bring these children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And we have fewer restrictions because we do not receive any money at all. But there's a second reason that we do that. And that is, you read in the Bible, and passages like the 25th chapter of Matthew, where Jesus describes judgment, and he said, I was hungry and you fed me, and I was naked and you clothed me, and I was sick and you visited me, and they said, "When, Lord, did we do this?" And he said, "When you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you did it unto me." That includes a lot of folks, but it certainly includes homeless children. And then a passage like the James 1:27 that says, "Pure religion and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit the fatherless," that is, to nurture the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and keep themselves unspotted from the world. So the Lord has laid upon God's people the responsibility of taking care of children in need, and we don't want to take it off the shoulders of you and put it to the government. Our support comes from churches like this one and from individuals. Actually, at the end of the year, when we look at the income, we have about the same. Individuals that send money, and we total all of it up, and churches. And then a third area of support is, in a sense, we're self-supporting. From the very beginning, there have been generous people that have made generous contributions, sometimes in their will or their estate. And so we have a foundation and an endowment. And the income off of that also goes to take care of the kids and to operate the home. Now, we try not to have to use any of the principal. The last 2 or 3 years where the income, as you know, if you have CDs down at the bank, is not very good, while we have had to use some of the principal. We also have 7 farms. And I don't know how many of you have been down to Tipton. This may be the first time since I've invited you. But we're just less than 10 miles from the Red River. It's where the North Fork of the Red River goes into the Red River. And we raise cotton. And so the income from that goes in the cattle and that thing in supporting this work and ministry. So while y'all's praying for the kids and our work down there, pray that we'll have a good cotton crop, because that's going to help us out too. We have evolved in our service. We started out with large wards that sometimes, back then they called them dormitories. And each one of the dorms or wards would have a matron over that. Now you see in this picture, you see the beds just lined up. And the home had this vision that we don't want to say no to any child that needs a good home. Well, back then in the 20s and 30s, there wasn't a lot of processing. People would just drive up and start unloading kids. If we could find room for another bed, then we could put another kid in there. And I think about this because I can remember when trampolines were first invented. That shows my age. And you could pay some money and go to a good town, had some lights, and jump on the trampoline. Look at all those beds. Can't you just see kids jumping from one bed to another? Well, we in the 50s, we changed, and we began to have individual cottages, which each one of them had Christian couple as house parents. And the reasoning for that is we just believe this was less institutional and be more like a family environment. Our vision in the future is to put more of our children in Christian home placement. What do we mean by that? That just means that Christian families become committed to saying, we'll raise one of these Tipton kids, or maybe 2 of them if they're siblings especially. Right now, we began this 2 years ago, and we have 7 children that are placed in Christian homes. Well, why are we wanting to do more of that? Well, there's 2 reasons. The first reason is we believe that's the best possible place for a child to be raised, the least institutional. We believe that's a step forward in providing a Christian home for these kids. And there is a second reason. It's good stewardship. And all of us need to be careful about money, and money is tight now. I know it is in the churches, and it certainly is down there at the Tipton home. We could actually take care of 4 or 5 children, even though we provide the financial support for the child, placed in Christians' homes on what it takes to take care of one there on campus. One of the things, we got 7 placed in homes. That's about what we put in a house. So we've saved building a house and taking care of a staff and all of that. And so it's a good place for the child to be raised, and we can take care of more children. And So that's our vision for the future. We'll most likely always have the campus. There are some children that couldn't be placed that way. In many cases, a child needs to be there a while before they're placed in Christian homes. The oversight of the home, the board of directors, are the elders of the Tipton Church of Christ. This has been so ever since, even back when the home was in Canadian Texas. The home is, after all, a mission of the church. Show some of our houses on campus. They might look like a house that you live in. Could be it's a little bit bigger. We try to put 6 to 8 children in each one of the cottages, and you can see some of the bedrooms that the children would be in. On campus, our children apply for and work at various jobs. We don't give our kids a spending allowance, but they have an opportunity to go someplace to work. The original campus of 80 acres is now 120 acres, and most of the kids like to work. Some of them like to work a little bit more than others, and they just make more money. And their income from their job, there'll be a conference with their house parents. A savings account is started so that when they finish high school, and we still have oversight of our children even when they're 18 and they graduate from high school. I mean, after all, do you say goodbye to your kids and grandkids when they turn 18? But they'll have some savings there for if they're going to college or VOTEC or whatever direction they're going to go. And also, they'll have spending money, and then they'll have money to put in the collection when they go to church. All of our school-age children attend Tipton Public School. We have a close relationship with the school. We need the school, but the school needs us too. When you come to Tipton, see, I'm sure you're going to come visit us since you've been invited. The sign outside our town says population 650. We have approximately 300 students in kindergarten through high school, so we're a small school. And actually the school would have closed decades ago if it hadn't have been for the home. And there in the school, many of our students receive academic awards and recognition, and we're just as proud of our kids as you are your kids and grandkids. And this shows some of the extracurricular activities that our children are involved in. We're in a farming rural area. We encourage our children to have animals. We believe that's good for a child. Also, they learn some responsibility. You know, if you have a hog that you're raising to go to be a show animal, or a lamb, and you don't feed them, they're gonna let it known. And these kids will tell on each other, so you know they're learning some responsibility. And the upper part of this picture shows our football team. We play 8-man football in small schools. Since I've been associated with the home 3 years, 2 of those years we were runner-up state champions, and 1 year we were the state champs. Didn't lose a game all year. 2 of the starting 8 are Tipton Home boys, and there's other boys there from the Tipton Church of Christ. Graduation, 2013. It was a time to celebrate. Some are heading off to school, others entering the military. Of the 22 graduates of Tipton High School, 5 of them were Tipton Home kids, and 11 of them attend the Tipton Church of Christ. So our Church of Christ folks was half the graduating class of the Tipton school. Children are active in school activities and Bible camp. They'll go to Bible camp every summer, Quartz Mountain. And I tell folks, unless they're real sick, they're going to be at the Tipton Church of Christ 3 times a week. And most of the time, many times have alumni of the home that are there when I'm speaking, and they say amen. Daily, we have Bible studies in each one of the cottages and devotionals, and then once a week we have an all-campus with staff and children devotional. And I'm saying that to say we are committed to do what we can. Our mission is to bring these children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Another thing that the directors said to me when I visited with them says, we want you to make sure you communicate that we do not consider this primarily or exclusively a benevolent work. And what do we mean by benevolent? Well, that means you'd provide food and place to sleep and clothes and medical care, and that's needed and that's good. But we have a broader vision, and that is to bring these kids up there in the Lord. So we're committed to that. And we've started 2 years ago encouraging the kids, along with the youth ministry there at the Tipton Church of Christ, to be involved in mission projects. 2 years ago, two of our senior high kids went to the inner city of Houston and worked in building houses for the homeless, and they have been involved junior high and senior high in mission projects in a 2 or 3 county area around Tipton. Last year, May 28th, when the tornadoes came through Oklahoma City, actually there were several different days they came. But the Southwest Church of Christ, our director called them, but they had, I believe, 4 houses that were destroyed among their members there, and one person that was killed, and asked what we could do and what our kids could do. Well, anyway, our junior high and senior high kids came and spent several days in tornado cleanup there. And when he called and talked to the church, they said, well, we'll find homes for all the kids to be staying in. And Brother Smith said, no, I really don't want you to do that, because I know how well that our kids are treated as guests when they go. And we want everyone to understand that we're coming to work. So they took their sleeping bags and they slept there at the floor of the church. You see in the center that we have the kids and staff that had a prayer circle and a devotional out there during the time that's doing the tornado cleanup. Opportunities to help. Now, you knew I was going to talk about that, didn't you? And we have some traditions there at the Tipton home, and that reminds me that we have a book, the Tipton Home Story, that was written by one of the girls that grew up at the home and her husband, and we give that to the churches. We want to make sure that you have it. And you go back and read this, and some of these traditions have been there for 50 years or even longer. One of those is people coming in and doing volunteers to teach summer enrichment programs and classes with the kids. And that could include anything from craft classes to music lessons, science camp, auto body repair, taekwondo, something that you have a passion for. You'd like to spend a week or maybe 3 days and bring some of the other church folks, or perhaps even your young people. And some of you ladies may be crafty ladies. I'm not talking about crafty and working with your hands. My wife retired from teaching school for 26 years. She taught a lot of hands-on science, and she's taking our junior high and senior high kids, 2 or 3 of them with her 2 years. And the thing that has impressed me, I know it was good for the kids at Tipton Home. It was very good for our young people that went over there and spent a week working with the kids and came back very, very enthused. So call us, and we'll try to find a place for you to do it. Secondly, opportunities to help. Seriously consider being a host family for one of our children. And what do we mean by that? Well, there are several times each year that we try to close the campus. It gives an opportunity for the staff to spend some time with their family. Thanksgiving, Christmas, 2 weeks in the summer. And so our children need to go someplace. And in most cases, they don't need to or should go back to their biological families. So the first reason I'm asking you to be a host family, that means you would take 1 or 2 of our kids for those times, is it would be helping us out there at the home. But secondly, it gives you an opportunity to make a valuable contribution to the nurturing of these kids. You know, it's common when I'm out talking to churches that someone will say, you know, we kept a Tipton kid for a number of years till, they were grown, and they call us and come back and visit us, and they're 25, 30, 35, 40 years old. And so, if a child is there at the home for 10 years, they may be in 2 or 3 different house parents. you're their host family, then you have an opportunity to really add to the stability of this child as they grow up and become an adult. So that's the way that you could help. Volunteer to keep one of our kids. And, we found out that our Christian home placement, most of those kids come from the families that have been their host families. They have a kid for 6 months, a year, and they say, well, I think we could raise that kid. And so that's the way it works. And in raising these children, if you are a Christian home placement family, we provide the financial resources to raise the child, all the medical expenses, and provide the professional staff, the counselors, and the social workers, still being under the oversight of the Tipton Home. And then we asked you to always encourage your congregation to remember Tipton Home in your annual budget. And I asked you, what about putting the Tipton in your family budget? Many of you are supporting good Christian ministries and missions, both, I know, as this church and as individuals. And I'm not encouraging anybody to stop supporting any good work to give support to the Tipton Home. But many, many families, I'm sure there may be a number, I wouldn't know how many, that you support, maybe foreign mission work or prison ministry or something like that. And my wife always takes care of that. I've always got this theory about balancing the checkbook, that if we run out of money before the end of the month, that it's her fault. But she started putting this on a bank draft, the different Tipton Home support and other support that we do, and we'd be glad to provide that for you. We had the opportunity to give a presentation at Sunset School recently. And the worship leader, the song leader, is named Luke. And he gave this little story before he started the singing service. He says, I've known a Tipton Home all my life. My grandmother was a little girl that came to the home, I think it was in 1942, with a little brother and a little sister. And she said she'd tell us all of these stories about the Tipton Home growing up, and had a spray bronze cotton stalk to remind her of when they'd pick cotton in the cotton fields there at the home. When she passed away, at that time, the Tipton Home had the traveling group of children at the Tipton Home Singers, and they'd go around and sing for their supper at churches. And they recorded this music, and that was what was played at her funeral. And he made the statement, he says, I probably wouldn't be here preparing for mission work and ministry if it hadn't been for Tipton Home. So, I think about that, whether it's a memorial gift or whatever that you're sending. Here's a third generation that is still greatly benefiting from the support that Christian people had given. And we talked about our foundation, and most of that comes from generous gifts. In many cases, it comes from the states or a will. And when I first thought about that, I thought, well, that's for rich people. But I want you to think about that a little bit, because probably most all of us could benefit from good estate planning. And if you'd like to have an interest in that, call us, and we would put you with a good estate planner. Younger families, be a good time to start making serious plans for retirement. And you might want to include the Tipton Home in those plans. So remember the home and the will. Jesus said in Luke 6:38, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Let me give you my cotton patch translation of that. You never can outgive the Lord. And we asked you to continue to pray for these children, that they'll make good decisions, and pray also for the house parents. They're the real heroes and heroines of this work, because they're on call you know, 24 hours a day, making daily sacrifices. And so just pray for them and their work and ministry in raising these children in a Christian environment. I want to talk to you a little bit about our Change for Children campaign. And you've probably seen something like this before. It's just a can that you put change in. And it may not sound that significant. Us guys, at the end of the day, we reach down in the bottom in our pants pocket, and there's some coins there, maybe laid on the dresser, and you ladies probably got some coins in the bottom of your purse. But when I took this responsibility, my wife and I had been house parents right after we graduated from college, Paragould Children's Home, northeastern corner of Arkansas. So I spent a lot of time talking with them. And they said, make sure you seriously do a Change for Children campaign. Now, they've been doing this for over 30 years. But the last 3 years, they have brought in over $250,000 in the change cans. Now, their support comes primarily all across Arkansas. And there's a lot of congregations in Arkansas. But our support comes all across Texas and Oklahoma. And we have, I'm sure, as many congregations that they have. So that's significant when you talk about $250,000. And with all of our people and churches supporting it, that's doable. But there's another reason that I encourage you to really get involved and participate this. And that is, when I look at the records of people that support this work, we've got good, faithful folks that's been sending money for years and years. But when you look at their age, most of them are over 65. And let's talk about that a little bit. Because I've always loved history, especially the church's history, restoration history. And we've always had a passion for taking care of homeless kids. 200 years ago, when churches first started being formed in Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee and those areas, they started building orphan homes, children's homes. It's just in the Church of Christ DNA. I have read where in Oklahoma and Texas that we are taking care of more children than any other church group, and we're not the largest group. But when we look at the age of people who are supporting this work, it tells us we're not passing this down to the next generation. So I want to encourage you to take one of these cans and talk to it about your kids and your grandkids when they come to see you. And it's not really given unless you sacrifice. You take something out of your allowance if you're a child. You teach a Sunday school class. Take it to your class. Explain it to your kids. So when these young folks are the leaders in the church 20 years from now, we will still have this strong commitment of taking care of children that need a good Christian home. Remember, our support must come from people of compassion, and that means people like you. And I'm going to close with this picture. This was taken about a year ago and had all of our children and our staff and the elders of the Tipton Church of Christ, the board of directors, taking out in front of this original building, which we're still now using. I want to tell you a little story that shows really how that you folks here relate to what we're doing there in Tipton, Oklahoma in this mission and ministry. It comes from the Old Testament. When Moses was leading the children of Israel out of Egyptian slavery, they were going to the Promised Land. They had to fight some battles. And on one occasion, they went up against the Amalekites. Now, the Israelites had been slaves for 400 years. They didn't even have any iron swords. They weren't trained in military. Scripture said that the Amalekites had war camels like the sands on a seashore. Well, Moses stood and faced towards God and raised his hands, and as long as he was raising his hands, they were winning a great victory. But he couldn't hold his hands up all day. So Aaron and Hur came and held his hands, arms out, and they accomplished a great victory for God. And that's where you folks fit in, because our commitment is to take in children that need a good home, need a Christian home, need an upbringing. And that's only possible as you continue to stand beside us and hold out our hands.